Hello and welcome to the Tired Craftsman channel. It is 3:15 a.m. at the time of filming this, and I don't really have a theme-appropriate intro planned out. Plus I've got Slow Song by the Knocks just stuck in my head right now, so mentally I'm no good to anyone. That is a good song though. After this video, in fact, I suggest you listen to it. Treat yourself, you deserve it. Anyway, if you follow me on Instagram, you may already be familiar with my spring-loaded vampire steak launcher. I've gotten a lot of requests from my followers to make a tutorial about this, so this one's for all of you. One thing I would like to point out though, this is meant to be just a practical effect prop. If you actually make something like this that has a real blade or a sharp point at the end of it, that is very, very illegal in most places because governments are as boring as they are ineffectual. On to the project. For the launcher itself, I'm going to start with some 3/4 inch PVC pipe. Also, make sure when you're getting your pipe that you get the thicker gauge one. There's a thinner type, we don't want that. I'm going to cut about a 6-inch piece. This is going to be what houses the spring. To hold the projectile in place, I'm marking and cutting this L-shaped channel on the top of the pipe. As you can see, it takes a minute to cut through that with a hand tool. Also, I added this cut-off piece of a PVC connector. That's for aesthetic purposes. You don't need that for any practical reason. Then I lightly sanded it with some 220 grit sandpaper, which will help the paint stick to it better. Then I cut a roughly 2.5 inch piece of 2.5 inch wide oak dowel as sort of like a base for the spring. To propel the projectile, I'm going to use this 4-inch compression spring I took from an old airsoft gun. I used a bit of hot glue to stick the spring to the oak dowel, then I installed it all in the pipe and closed it up with the end cap and put a screw in it to hold it all together so the spring doesn't shoot out the back when you load it. And with that, the launcher assembly is done, so now it's just time to paint it. First I gave it a couple coats of gray primer, and then I finished it off with 2 coats of metallic dark metal from Krylon. And while that's drying, I turned a 6.5 inch piece of 3-inch wide oak dowel on my lathe to get the wooden stake shape. The dowel is too wide to fit in the pipe, so I had to take down the back half a bit. Occasionally checking the fit to make sure I don't make it too loose or too snug. I don't want it rattling around inside the launcher, but I also don't want any resistance either. And once I liked the fit, I loaded the stake and marked where I'm going to put a screw, which will keep it locked in place. Then once I got the screw in, I wrapped the threads with a bit of electrical tape to make it slide a bit easier against the edges of the L-lock. Honestly, a screw is probably not the best thing to use for this, but I'm working with a budget, you know how it is. But it seems to all fit together pretty well, and then when you push the screw over to the side, the stake launches. And to ensure this stays a fun prop and not a dangerous weapon, I'm going to use a 2-inch piece of foam dowel for the tip. Then to attach the foam tip, I applied some contact cement to both the foam and the wood. I let the contact cement dry for about 10 minutes, and then the cement-coated pieces stick together really nicely. But that doesn't look like a stake, so I trimmed and sanded the tip just a little bit to give it a nice dangerous looking point, while not actually being dangerous. Again, this is a toy, this is not a real weapon. Then I coated the oak in some dark walnut wood stain. To do that, you just rub it all over the surface, and then after a couple minutes take a clean paper towel and you wipe off the excess. Otherwise it's not going to dry for a really long time. And of course that foam tip needs a little something, so I used some silver Plat-Effects paint because it is a flexible paint and it sticks really well to foam, which means after repeated use the paint job should hold up pretty well. And finally I did some weathering on the launcher by dry brushing some silver along the edges, just give it a little bit of wear. For those of you who don't know, dry brushing is when you get some paint on the brush, you wipe almost all of it off, and then you just lightly go over some key areas that you want to highlight. You know, like places that would get scratches or beat up over time after repeated use. And that is how it's done. Hope this video was helpful to you if you wanted to build one of these yourself. Hope it was informative, told you everything you needed to know. And again, one more time, just a prop. Do not put anything sharp on the end of this. Very illegal. Okay, I've done all I can do. It's in your hands now. Until next time, consider subscribing, and I'm going to bed.